We'll begin with the smallest nuclear incident in history and work our way up to the most devastating nuclear disaster ever. Okay, what if the very technology we built to power our future turned around and tried to wipe us off the map? Today, we're counting down 15 nuclear disasters that shook the world to its core, and we're doing it from the least devastating all the way up to the absolute worst catastrophe in nuclear history. Trust me, guys, even number 15 on this list is nightmare fuel. Each one of these events left behind poisoned land, shattered lives, and secrets governments tried to bury forever. Some of these disasters you've definitely heard of, but others? Most people have zero clue they even happened. And that's what makes them even scarier. Stick around because the last one on this list is so insane, so horrifyingly devastating, it'll change how you see the modern world. Now let's get into it. SL-1 Reactor Explosion. 3 men, 1 reactor. A single mistake. On January 3rd, 1961, a small experimental reactor called SL-1 at the Idaho National Reactor Testing Station experienced a steam explosion so violent it literally impaled one operator to the ceiling with a control rod. Yeah, you read that right, pinned to the damn ceiling. The other 2 operators died almost instantly. This was the first fatal nuclear reactor accident in American history. The bodies were so radioactive that they had to be buried in lead-lined caskets. The whole thing was caused by manually withdrawing a single control rod just 20 inches too far. 20 inches. That's all it took to turn 3 young soldiers into America's first nuclear martyrs. The government kept this one real quiet for decades. Saint-Laurent Nuclear Power Plant. France loves its nuclear energy. Like, really loves it. Nearly 70% of their electricity comes from nuclear plants. So, when the Saint-Laurent plant suffered not 1 but 2 partial meltdowns, you'd think people would freak out. Nope. In 1969, 5 uranium fuel elements melted inside the reactor during a loading error. Then in 1980, it happened again, this time with graphite and uranium fuel melting together. Both times, France handled it quietly, cleaned it up, and barely made international news. No deaths were reported, and contamination was supposedly contained. But the fact that a country can have 2 meltdowns at the same facility and most people have never heard about it, that tells you everything about how nuclear incidents get swept under the rug. Chalk River accidents. Canada's Chalk River facility is basically the granddaddy of nuclear screw-ups. In December 1952, a combination of mechanical failures and operator errors led to a partial meltdown of the NRX reactor. The core was destroyed. Millions of gallons of radioactive water flooded the basement. Guess who helped clean it up? A young 28-year-old naval officer named Jimmy Carter. Yes, the future president of the United States. He literally went into a damaged nuclear reactor to help disassemble it. Then in 1958, a fuel rod caught fire during removal, and this is wild, the burning rod was actually dropped into a maintenance pit. Contamination spread across a huge area. Canada cleaned it up, learned some lessons, and kept going. Tough bastards. Sellafield. Before there was Chernobyl, there was Windscale. On October 10th, 1957, the graphite core of a nuclear reactor in northwest England caught fire and burned for 3 days straight. Radioactive contamination spread across the UK and into Europe. The British government responded by dumping milk from nearby farms. Approximately 240 cancer cases are attributed to the fallout. The government immediately classified the full accident report and renamed the whole damn facility to Sellafield to distance themselves from the disaster. Rebranding at its finest, the fire released radioactive iodine, cesium, and polonium into the atmosphere. For decades, Britain downplayed the severity, but historians and scientists now rank Windscale as one of the worst nuclear accidents of the 20th century. Oh, and real quick, if you're finding this interesting, smash that subscribe button. We're just getting started, and it only gets crazier from here. 3 Mile Island, March 28th, 1979. A pressure valve got stuck open. Coolant drained from the reactor core, and operators, confused by misleading instruments, made one wrong call after another. The result? The worst nuclear accident in American history. About half the reactor core melted down. 140,000 people evacuated the surrounding area. Pregnant women and children were told to flee immediately. The psychological impact was enormous. An entire nation suddenly questioned whether nuclear energy was worth the risk. Physically, the containment building held. No immediate deaths occurred, but the political fallout? Absolutely massive. 3 Mile Island effectively killed the American nuclear power industry for 30 years. No new reactor was ordered in the US until 2012, Goiânia Incident. This one isn't a reactor accident. It's arguably more terrifying. 2 scrap metal scavengers in Goiânia, Brazil, broke into an abandoned hospital and stole a radiotherapy device. They cracked it open and found a glowing blue powder inside, cesium-137. They thought it was beautiful. They showed it to friends. Kids rubbed it on their skin like glitter. One 6-year-old girl ate a sandwich with cesium dust on her hands. She died weeks later. In total, 4 people died, 249 were contaminated, and several city blocks had to be demolished. The glowing powder that looked magical was delivering lethal doses of radiation to everyone who touched it. This disaster proves you don't need a reactor to create a nuclear nightmare. Tokaimura nuclear accident. Forget sophisticated equipment malfunctions. This disaster happened because workers were literally pouring enriched uranium into buckets by hand. On September 30th, 1999, at a fuel processing plant in Tokaimura, Japan, 3 workers accidentally triggered an uncontrolled nuclear chain reaction, a criticality event. The blue flash of Cherenkov radiation lit up the room. 2 of the 3 workers received fatal doses. One man, Hisashi Ochi, received 17 sieverts of radiation, the highest dose a human had ever survived, even temporarily. Doctors kept him alive for 83 days as his body literally disintegrated from the inside. His case remains one of the most horrific examples of acute radiation syndrome ever documented. Over 600 workers and residents were exposed to elevated radiation levels. Number 8, Kyshtym Disaster. Same year as Windscale, but 100 times worse. At the Mayak nuclear facility in the Soviet Union, a cooling system failure caused a tank of liquid radioactive waste to explode with the force of 70 to 100 tons of TNT. Radioactive contamination spread over 20,000 square kilometers. Entire villages were evacuated and erased from maps. The Soviet government didn't even acknowledge the disaster happened until 1976, nearly 20 years later. An estimated 10,000 people were evacuated, though many had already been exposed for days. Long-term cancer rates in the region skyrocketed. The Kyshtym disaster was rated level 6 on the International Nuclear Event Scale, making it the 3rd worst nuclear disaster in history. And most people still haven't heard of it. Number 7, Hanford site, ongoing. Nobody talks about Hanford enough. This sprawling nuclear production complex in Washington state produced plutonium for the bomb dropped on Nagasaki. For decades after, it deliberately and accidentally released massive amounts of radioactive material into the environment, into the Columbia River, into the air, into the ground. We're talking about 56 million gallons of radioactive waste stored in underground tanks, many of which are leaking right now. Cleanup has been ongoing since 1989 and is expected to cost over $300 billion. The surrounding communities suffered elevated rates of thyroid disease and cancer for decades. Hanford is the most contaminated nuclear site in the Western Hemisphere, and it's still a ticking time bomb. Number 6, Semipalatinsk test site. Imagine living near a place where 456 nuclear bombs were detonated over 40 years. That was reality for the people of Semipalatinsk. The Soviet Union used this vast steppe as its primary nuclear testing ground, and the local Kazakh population was essentially treated as guinea pigs. Birth defects, cancers, genetic mutations passed down through generations. An estimated 1.5 million people were exposed. Many weren't even warned that tests were happening. The land remains contaminated today. Kazakhstan has since become one of the world's strongest advocates for nuclear disarmament. They earned that position the hardest possible way. Number 5, Castle Bravo. The United States expected a 6-megaton explosion. They got 15 megatons, 2.5 times more powerful than predicted. Castle Bravo was the largest nuclear weapon ever detonated by the US, and its fallout was catastrophic. Radioactive ash rained down on the inhabited atolls of Rongelap and Utirik. The islanders, who had no idea what was happening, watched white powder fall from the sky. Children played in it like snow. A Japanese fishing boat, the Lucky Dragon No. 5, was also caught in the fallout zone. The crew suffered severe radiation sickness, and one crew member died. The Marshall Islands remain contaminated to this day, and some atolls are still uninhabitable. Still watching? Good, because the top 4 are on a completely different level of devastation. Don't you dare click away now. Number 4, Mayak. Before the 1957 explosion at Mayak, the facility had already been poisoning everything around it for years. From 1948 to 1956, the Mayak plant routinely dumped radioactive waste directly into the Teka River, the primary water source for dozens of downstream villages. Tens of thousands of people drank, bathed in, and irrigated crops with lethally contaminated water. The Soviet government knew and did nothing for years. When they finally relocated some villages, they told residents it was for construction purposes. Epidemiological studies later revealed massively elevated rates of leukemia, cancer, and chronic radiation syndrome among the river communities. This wasn't a disaster, it was deliberate, sustained poisoning. Number 3, Fukushima, March 11, 2011. A 9-magnitude earthquake triggered a massive tsunami that slammed into Japan's northeast coast. The Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant lost all power. Backup generators flooded, cooling systems failed, 3 reactors melted down over the following days. Hydrogen explosions blew the reactor buildings apart on live television. Over 150,000 people were evacuated. The Japanese government established a 20-kilometer exclusion zone. Radioactive water poured into the Pacific Ocean. No direct deaths from radiation were confirmed, but over 2,000 people died from evacuation-related stress, illness, and suicide. The cleanup is expected to take 30 to 40 years and cost over $200 billion. Fukushima proved that even in the most technologically advanced nation on Earth, nature can still humble nuclear power in an instant. Nuclear weapons testing. This isn't one event, it's an era. Between 1945 and 1996, over 2,000 nuclear weapons were detonated across the planet. Atmospheric tests alone injected enough radioactive fallout into the global atmosphere to measurably increase background radiation worldwide. Every single human alive today carries trace amounts of cesium-137 and strontium-90 in their bodies from these tests. Indigenous populations in the Pacific Islands, Aboriginal communities in Australia, downwind communities in Nevada and Kazakhstan, they all paid the price for nuclear progress. Studies estimate that fallout from atmospheric testing has caused or will cause hundreds of thousands of cancer deaths globally. We literally nuked our own planet over and over again, and we're still paying for it. Chernobyl, April 26, 1986. 1:23 a.m., Reactor number 4 at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant exploded during a safety test gone catastrophically wrong. The blast blew the 1,000-ton reactor lid clean off the building. A plume of radioactive material shot into the atmosphere and spread across Europe. The graphite moderator caught fire and burned for 10 days, continuously spewing radiation into the sky. 31 people died in the immediate aftermath, firefighters and plant workers who had no idea they were absorbing lethal doses of radiation. The nearby city of Pripyat, home to 49,000 people, was evacuated 36 hours later. Most never returned. A 2,600 square kilometer exclusion zone was established and remains in place today, nearly 4 decades later. The total death toll is fiercely debated. Estimates range from 4,000 to 93,000 excess cancer deaths. Over 350,000 people were permanently resettled. The economic cost exceeded $700 billion. Chernobyl didn't just destroy a reactor. It accelerated the collapse of the Soviet Union, transformed global nuclear policy forever, and created a radioactive ghost land that will remain uninhabitable for 20,000 years. That's the price of the worst nuclear disaster in human history. And it all started because someone wanted to run a damn safety test.